Today in the Daily Dose, the California Gold Rush. 50 years before the California Gold Rush, the first gold rush in American history began in 1799 after a 12-year-old boy named Conrad Reed unearthed a 17-pound gold nugget in Carrabas County, North Carolina, northeast of Charlotte. Within months after the find, more than 30,000 miners were prospecting the Tar Heel State, producing enough gold that the U.S. Mint used North Carolina gold to issue all gold coins into the U.S. economy for the next 30 years to come. A half-century later, on January 24th of 1848, New Jersey carpenter James Wilson Marshall spotted flakes of gold along the banks of the American River in Coloma, California, which is a major snowmelt tributary at the base of the Sierra Nevada mountains. At the time of his discovery, Marshall had been building a water-powered sawmill for John Sutter, a German-born Swiss citizen who founded the colony of Nueva Helvetia, or New Switzerland, which would later become the city of Sacramento. It made my heart thump, Marshall recalled, of his discovery some years later, for I was certain it was gold. In a remarkable twist of fate that altered a nation's push for westward expansion, just days after Marshall discovered gold at Sutter's Mill, the Mexican-American War ended with the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which handed present-day California, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, and parts of Colorado to the United States for a payment of $15 million. At the time of Marshall's discovery, the newly acquired California territory boasted a population of 6,500 Californios, which were people of Spanish or Mexican descent, 700 mostly American foreigners, and 150,000 Native Americans, including hundreds that would soon be enslaved by Sutter as a source of labor and makeshift militia to defend his territory from what would become the largest mass migration in American history. Despite Marshall and Sutter's best attempts to keep their find a secret, word got out by mid-March, when at least one newspaper reported that large quantities of gold had been unearthed at Sutter's Mill. The little town of San Francisco was first to feel the frenzy, when store owner and newspaperman Sam Brannan paraded the streets with a vial of gold he collected from Sutter's Creek. And by mid-June, shops and businesses were shuttered after 3/4 of the male population of San Francisco fled the city in search of gold. By August, the city was quickly overwhelmed by the arrival of 4,000 mainly international miners from Hawaii, Mexico, Chile, Peru, and China. President James K. Polk furthered the spread of gold fever domestically when he detailed a report made by California's military governor, Colonel Richard Mason, stating that the accounts of abundance of gold are of such an extraordinary character as would scarcely command belief were they not corroborated by the authentic reports of officers in the public service. After Polk's announcement, the race was on in earnest, as mostly male fortune seekers borrowed money, mortgaged their properties, or spent their life savings to make the arduous journey west. Thousands of would-be gold miners, known as 49ers, traveled overland across the mountains or by sea, sailing to Panama or even around Cape Horn, the southernmost point of South America. For those who chose a route through Panama, passengers arrived at the Isthmus of Panama from the Atlantic side before a 20-day trek to the Pacific side of the nation before boarding a second clipper ship for the sail north to California. By the end of the year, the non-native population of California was estimated at 100,000 people, compared to 20,000 at the end of 1848 and around 800 at the beginning of 48. To accommodate the needs of the 49ers, gold mining towns sprang up across the region, complete with price-gouging shops, saloons, brothels, and other businesses seeking to make their own gold rush fortunes without the need for a prospecting pan or a sluice. The overcrowded chaos in the mining camps and towns grew ever more lawless, including rampant stealing, gambling, prostitution, and violence. One such 49er was John Walker, who upended his life in central Missouri despite his recent engagement to his girlfriend Eliza. Heading west by land, Walker traveled 25 miles a day as he managed a team of prairie schooners and livestock on the long journey west. After working the motherlode for more than a year, Walker sent a letter home, writing, "I cannot advise any person to come, but if any of our neighbors are determined to reach the gold fields, say them to fix no time when they will return, and so arrange their business that they may stay several years, for it will take more time to make a fortune than many have supposed. Married men should bring their families, and young men who are under contract should close them, for it is too far and too long to be separated from such tender relations. The society here is far from being good, but by another year it will be better." By 1850, more than 25% of California's burgeoning population was born outside the United States, including 25,000 immigrants from China, who fled floods, crop failures, famines, and political unrest during the Red Turban Rebellion. And as the amount of surface gold began to dwindle, miners increasingly fought one another for profits as anti-Chinese, anti-foreigner tensions exploded across the region. By 1850, California's legislature passed the foreign miners tax, which levied a monthly fee of $20 on non-citizens, or the equivalent of more than $500 a month in today's currency, despite the fact that Chinese laborers worked for less money and longer hours than whites, oftentimes given the most dangerous and backbreaking roles in a given mining operation. Throughout 1849, a mostly male population suffering from gold fever borrowed money, mortgaged properties, or spent their life savings to make the difficult journey to California, leaving behind their wives who were obliged to take on new responsibilities such as managing family farms and businesses on top of caring for their children. By the end of the year, the non-native population of California reached an estimated 100,000 lives, compared to 20,000 at the end of 1848, up from 800 in March of that same year. The cost of a one-way trip ranged from $150 to $300, including transit across the Isthmus of Panama, or a range of $5,000 to $10,000 in today's currency. Prices skyrocketed as demand grew for transit to the gold fields, raising one-way tickets to a range of $400 to $1,200, or $13,000 to $40,000 in today's currency. The majority of 49ers arrived into California without a return ticket, which in turn littered San Francisco's port with clipper ships abandoned by both passengers and crew. As the tiny town blossomed seemingly overnight into a bustling, lawless city, demand for lumber made abandoned clipper ships a different kind of motherlode for the construction of houses, banks, saloons, hotels, and jails, while still other abandoned clippers were used as landfill that substantially expanded the city's footprint over marshlands along the shores of San Francisco Bay. Women became a much sought-after commodity in mining communities made up of 92% men, while the few that did make the trip earned their living in growing boom towns, working in saloons, hotels, and restaurants that seemed to pop up on a daily basis. Many women's journals back east espoused their fears that gold-thirsty men were bound to devolve into chaos without the civilizing influence of women, running stories and ads encouraging educated, cultured women to travel west with the hope of taming the 49ers. And while few took up the offer, the percentage of women in gold mining communities eventually rose to approximately 10,000 by 1860, or roughly 19% of the total population of California. As more and more 49ers flowed into California, mining camps and towns grew ever more lawless, including gambling, alcoholism, prostitution, and violence. Most arrived into California with little more than the clothes on their backs. San Francisco merchants soon filled the needs of the 49ers at instantly inflated prices. At the height of the boom in 1849, for instance, a single egg could cost as much as $25 in today's currency. Coffee went for more than $100 per pound, while the replacement cost of a new pair of boots could set a miner back more than $2,500. Over the full course of the California Gold Rush, more fortunes were made by merchants than miners, including the likes of future industrialist Philip Armour, who would later found a meatpacking empire in Chicago. Before John Studebaker amassed his automobile fortune, he manufactured wheelbarrows for the 49ers, while bankers Henry Wells and William Fargo moved west to build one of the nation's premier banking institutions. Another success story was Levi Strauss, who switched from selling canvas tarps and wagon covers to grow his Levi's denim jeans brand in San Francisco and beyond. Just 20 months after Marshall struck gold at Sutter's Mill, by the mid-1850s, more than 300,000 people, 1 out of every 90 people in the United States, had flocked to California. The gold rush fast-tracked California's admission to the Union when it applied for statehood late in 1849, with a proposed constitution that barred Southern-style slavery from the state, which provoked a crisis in Congress between proponents of slavery and abolitionist politicians. To quell the dispute, the Compromise of 1850 was proposed by Kentucky Senator Henry Clay, which allowed California to enter as a free state, while the territories of Utah and New Mexico were left to decide the legal status of slavery on a territory-by-territory basis, leading to statehood on September 9th of 1850, which added California as the 31st state in the Union. Prospecting in the early days of the California Gold Rush was primarily surface mining, where 49ers worked an area known as the Mother Lode and beyond. It is found along the banks of the streams and in the beds of the same, and often from 10 to 50 feet from the beds up the bank, Sheldon Schufelt wrote in 1849. We sometimes have to dig several feet deep before we find any. In other places, all the dirt and clay will pay to wash, but generally the clay pays best. We tell when it will pay by trying the dirt with a pan. This is called prospecting here. If it will pay from 6 to 12.5 pieces of gold per panful, then we go to work. Some wash with cradles, some with what is called a tom or a sluice, or various other fixings. But I like the tom best of anything that I have seen. As surface gold became increasingly difficult to find, the industrialization of mining drove more and more miners from independent operators to hourly wage earners, effectively reducing the flow of inbound fortune seekers to a trickle. Developed in 1853, the new technique of hydraulic mining brought enormous profits to wealthy mine owners, while destroying much of the region's pristine natural landscape. And while gold mining in California continued throughout the 1850s, it reached its zenith in 1852, when some $81 million was pulled from California mines, leveling off to around $45 million a year by 1857. Immigration into the state continued to grow for other reasons than gold, reaching 380,000 lives by the end of the decade. In terms of the impact of the California Gold Rush, dams intended to supply water for hydraulic mining in the summer months altered the course of many rivers away from farmland, while tailings from mines clogged other rivers with silt. The logging industry further degraded the territory due to skyrocketing demand for lumber used to build homes and businesses, as well as timber for mines and mine boilers. Hydraulic mining was eventually outlawed in 1884, soon making agriculture the dominant industry in California. During the height of the gold rush, violence against foreigners increased dramatically, with beatings, rapes, and murders becoming increasingly commonplace. However, no one ethnic group suffered more than Native Americans, who witnessed the deaths of more than 100,000 lives due to disease and mining-related accidents, while an additional 4,000 were murdered by enraged miners. Faced with mounting debts, Sutter was forced to deed his vast landholdings to one of his sons, who used it to create the settlement of Sacramento. Infuriated that the town had not been named after him, Sutter began a decades-long campaign to seek reimbursement from the U.S. government for all his financial losses. Yet when he faced growing threats of insolvency, a bitter Sutter retired to Pennsylvania in 1871 before passing away on June 18, 1880. While precious few gold rush towns have survived the ravages of time, much of California gold rush heritage has been preserved at places like the decaying ghost town of Bodie State Historic Park and at Marshall Gold Discovery State Historic Park, making the California Gold Rush a turning point event in a nation's push for westward expansion. And there you have it, the California Gold Rush, today in the Daily Dose. Today's Daily Dose documentary is brought to you by PlatosPeach.com, a lesson planning tool leveraging content like this and much more for educators and homeschooling parents. Check out the description for more information so that you too can teach something new every day.